Hi everyone, my name is Shelby Jones, and utilizing the DMAIC framework, I was able to make an improvement at my company. The first phase of the DMAIC process, as you all know, is to define the problem, the customers, the goals, and the requirements of the project. I work in an automotive company that manufactures interior plastic car parts. Recently, the company has opened up a new manufacturing facility, and they have migrated from an older facility to the new one. Within this facility, there is an operator performing their assigned duties on what they call a utility route. This operator is referred to as a utility operator. So the process kind of works like this. In short, the parts are molded in a number of presses within the plant, and other operators are tasked with transferring those parts into the molded work in progress or molded WIP area. Additionally, there are components that must be purchased from outside suppliers, and other operators are tasked with transferring those parts from the shipping docks to the purchased components area. In between the purchased components area and the molded WIP are secondary assembly fixtures where the molded WIP and the purchased components come together in assembly and are prepared for shipment to the customer. So now the work of the utility operator begins. The route consists of picking up parts from molded WIP and then delivering those parts by way of chutes and rolling racks to the secondary assembly machines so that the operators that operate the secondary assembly machines can easily access them for processing. The shipping docks are located on the opposite side of the plant, so as the utility operator is delivering the molded WIP to the other side of the assembly fixtures, they are also gathering the purchased components that have come in from shipping and delivering those to the assembly fixtures nearest to the shipping docks. Then the utility operator moves toward the other side with the other assembly fixtures and makes sort of a figure 8 type shape to finish delivering purchased components to the assembly fixtures nearest to the molding side. And then they complete the loop by heading back to molded WIP. There are 4 utility routes in this plant, all running similar routes, and all routes are set up to run at a 15-minute pitch. So now that we know the background, the problem, simplified, is that the routes are not meeting their 15-minute pitch. The scope was narrowed to one route, and in particular one area of the route. That would be here. This is where parts are being delivered to the assembly fixtures. Initial time studies were done by plant employees, and this route in particular was running at an average of 1 minute and 30 seconds over the designated pitch. So the manager at the plant showed me the bottleneck area and provided me with a time study of the overall route, and asked that I improve this particular section by reducing the cycle time to either meet the pitch or exceed the pitch, meaning that I could be under the target. There was no lower specification, just a cap of 15 minutes. So that was essentially the voice of the customer. So if the cycle time was reduced to just meet the 15-minute cap based on labor rates and 2 shifts running a day, there was a potential for a savings of about $16,000 a year. As identified in the define phase of the project, a specific area of the route was identified to be the bottleneck of the whole process. So given that information, I moved into the measure phase of the DMAIC process and performed time studies using the corporate standards and methods. The time studies were performed on 4 different tasks within the utilities route, and they are as followed. The clip area, which means the operator is obtaining an empty clip bin from an out-chute attached to an assembly machine that utilizes them, and then filling the clip bin with clips and then delivering the bin with clips to the in-chute. Console top plate, which is delivering a plastic car part called a console top plate to the assembly chutes by obtaining the part from the work in process storage and placing it in the chute made of preform and just plastic chutes. Console liner, which is where the utility operator was actually performing an assembly task by installing the console liner to the console top plate before that plate was being delivered to the line via the chute. And then the switch plate for hole, which means this is a bezel basically that goes into a vehicle. And this task was obtaining a bin of switch plate bezels from the WIP stores and then staging them in an area and emptying that WIP bin into a chute that was attached to an assembly machine and then replacing that bin to the WIP stores. So I did a total of 8 runs, and these processes took a total of 61.6 seconds to complete. Of note, many times the operator would have to stop to fill the console top chutes twice in one route, often because the assembly operators working the secondary assembly fixtures would already be out of parts. So the overall cycle time of the entire route often took a much larger hit due to the utility having to stop and fill the same chutes twice in one route. So ideally, you want the operator to only fill a chute once per route. But more on that later. So from there we moved into the analyze phase of the DMAIC process, and I utilized the fishbone diagram and the 5Y analyses to identify 4 root causes that were easily addressable within the 6-week time frame. So I was able to develop and implement these solutions and reduce the overall cycle time of the route. So the first root cause that I found was that the console top plate rack was insufficient size for the 15-minute route. So we have a calculator, and it basically said that 27 parts per route were necessary based on the tack time. And the console top plate racks only held about 15 parts, which meant that the utility operator often had to fill these racks twice in his route, so it was really driving up his cycle time. So given that information, I basically built an entirely new rack out of freeform, and the new rack now holds 27 parts. It actually holds 30 because the chutes are kind of a common size. But this means that the operator fills the racks one time per route, and he doesn't have to stop at that rack twice to refill. So the second root cause, I found that the utility operator was actually performing a secondary assembly task, and per the standard of the company, we do not want the utility operators actually performing assembly tasks. They should just be delivering parts. And so we don't really know how this happened, but I did a quick time study on the secondary assembly fixtures and found that one of the operators had a little bit of wait time, and they were able to easily install the console liner within the secondary assembly processes. So basically what I did is I made another rack, and now the utility operator is just loading the totes from the molded whip into a rack, and it's available for the assembly operator to use in their processes. So doing this, I was able to reduce the console liner, I guess, to about 3.05 seconds to load 1 bin of console tops to the line. So that was pretty great. So the third root cause, I found that the switch hole for plate, or the bezels that I was referring to, the utility operator would bring them from molded whip in a tote, and then they would set them in this bezel staging area on the left, you can see there, and they would unload them from that tote and then load them to a smaller chute that was attached to the assembly machine. And basically we were double handling the bezels. It was completely unnecessary to be unloading them from the totes. Generally speaking, we deliver the totes directly to the line unless the parts are really big. So I created yet another freeform rack and was able to reduce the cycle time from 1.51 seconds to load 1 bezel to about 0.09 seconds to load 1 bezel, because there are about 50 bezels in a tote. And so it was a major improvement. And again, that chute that was attached to the assembly machine was not big enough for the 15-minute route, so it eliminated that need to fill that rack twice on one 15-minute route. And the final root cause that I identified was actually kind of an ergonomic issue. So as you can see in the before picture, these clips this clip bin was being stored on the rear of the assembly machine, which as a standard you're not supposed to be storing anything on assembly machines because it's a safety hazard. But as the clips were coming from the outshoot, the utility operator was kind of having to reach over this assembly machine to refill the clip bins and then put it back into the in-chute for the operator. So it's kind of a blind load, and it was taking about 8.89 seconds to fill one bin. So I created another creeform structure, and you can see in the after picture that the clips are now sitting just below the outshoot, and it's at an appropriate ergonomic height, and so the utility operator can easily see what he's filling and then return that clip bin to the in-chute for the operator. So we improved that by about 3.5 seconds. So we're still in the improve phase, and here again use the corporate time study method to measure the processes after the solutions were implemented and reduce the time to complete the necessary task by about 40 seconds. But again, because we also don't have the need to fill the racks twice in one route, we were actually able to reduce the overall cycle time of the route from 17.5 minutes to approximately 13.5 minutes. So mission accomplished. Just kidding. DMAIC process says that we can't just stop at making improvements. We have to make sure that things stay controlled. And if you're up on pop culture, you can cue the Drake music. So I'll try not to bore you with the details of this eye chart, but essentially the responsible parties for ensuring best practices, like making sure that the correct size for the racks are enough to hold enough parts for a 15-minute route, and that the operators in assembly are the only ones performing the assembly tasks and not the utility operators, and that ergonomic assessments are being done. Those responsible parties are the line supervisors and the corporate teams performing the bi-yearly audits in the plants that ensure that the lean manufacturing standards and the standardized work standards are being followed, and those standards are critical to the success of an efficient route. So while internal audits can be effective, I think it's really important that the plant itself are actually performing some audits on a regular basis within the plant, so maybe a weekly evaluation in order to continuously improve and stay on top of those corporate standards. Bi-yearly I don't think is enough to ensure that best practices are being followed, so I know that's kind of outside the current scope of the project, so I guess I'll just have to suggest it at the next corporate lean and problem-solving meeting, but 6 weeks is not enough time to fix all the problems. Anyway, I want to thank you for taking the time to walk through a very high-level view of my project, and hopefully this was in the 7-minute time frame. I definitely don't think it was, but I hope I didn't bore you too much, so signing off.